So I'm also going to, in the next couple of days, everything that I talk through in this session, I'm going to type it up as a little bit of a mental health pack. So if you make sure that Michelle has your email address, you can type it in the chat box, or she might have it already. Then she can send that to you as well, along with some extra links for some resources that you might be interested in doing some more reading. And if you're based in Florence and you feel like you need some one-on-one support, I've got a list of really awesome therapists who are doing online sessions for people in lockdown. So you can, and they do in both languages, so you can have that in Italian or English. And if you're in Europe, that's even accessible to you because you're on Europe time. So, all right, so coronavirus, here we go. So the things that come with this kind of really sudden, shocking event, really, really rapidly from one day to the next, your entire life is different. One day you're going to work, you're going to school, you're seeing your friends, you're doing everything. The next day you're in full shutdown at home. Everything is different, everything changes. So something that happens when we have that kind of rapid change is that we experience a total loss of control. This is the first really big challenge. Change in your life on every level. This might be your first experience of a really big kind of traumatic event, or this might be actually opening up memories of past traumatic events that you've had, where maybe you've lost control, where maybe you've been trapped, where maybe you've become isolated. So we're in an experience where if you don't have a lot of experience with managing trauma, this can be really overwhelming. The rules are changing every day, and this is a huge part of the challenge, is that it can be really difficult to find our stability because every day the rules are different. Every day the numbers are different. Every day there's a new direction from your government that says, no, now it's this, no, now it's that. And I'm Australian, I live in Italy, but I know that in Australia, our government is giving very confusing directions that often contradict each other. So this is really, really tough. And then we've also got a lot of worry. We're worried about our safety. We're worried about the people that we love. We're worried about our family and friends. Half of us have lost our jobs. Suddenly everybody's jobless. There's a loss of jobs, security, stability. School is gone. All of the American students here, for example, were suddenly evacuated quite rapidly. And that's a really terrifying experience. And I think that the biggest thing that we're really facing is that this is an experience that doesn't have a clear end. We don't know when it's going to finish. There is no end date, and this is particularly challenging. So some of the common emotional responses that we have to this kind of major emergency is feeling overwhelmed, feeling confused, feeling really uncertain. Then we go into feeling fearful, a lot of anxiety. You could be feeling really on guard, a little bit jumpy. Some people respond by becoming very numb, very detached, very cold and cool. We're going to see a lot of anger, irritability, frustration, but there's also guilt and shame. Did I stuff up by going to that cafe last week? I didn't think it was so serious. And I went out and saw my friends and, oh my God, did I just kill somebody? We can have these kind of shame spirals about our behavior. We can really get into some vulnerable feelings. I know a lot of people are experiencing a lot of insomnia, difficulty sleeping and regulating sleep. And I know the nightmares are coming. Someone released a photo of lions in Russia, and I dreamed about lions for 2 nights. So I think that some of this experience is getting in there. It's messing up our sleep. Also, just that feeling of isolation, of being totally powerless. We can feel really anxious that we're not doing enough. I need to do more. What can I do? I have to do more. And then we've got the other kind of collective experiences where in one moment, like especially in Italy here, we're all singing from the balconies. And you have these amazing moments of beautiful solidarity. Everybody's singing, people are delivering food to each other. And then all of a sudden that can swing very suddenly to people becoming very suspicious. Why are you out? What are you doing on the street? Where are you going? So the challenge to stay in our collective unity can also be really strong in this time. And all of those feelings, they could be really mild for some people and they can be really severe for other people. I know that for myself, you know, one moment I'm laughing hysterically over some incredible meme or comic video that somebody's made. And 10 minutes later, I'm crying over my cup of tea and I'm dusting a pot plant or something ridiculous like that. So we can be experiencing a lot of changes really rapidly throughout the day. And this is all part of just slowly, slowly trying to integrate this huge emotional experience, and it's all completely normal. And I want to say that again, it's all normal. Whatever you're feeling, whatever you're going through, these are normal feelings. Our challenge is, in the face of those feelings, what do we choose to do about them? And that's where we have our power. That's where we can really empower ourselves. And that's the place where we have some control. We don't have control over this situation. And that's something that can be really hard to accept, but we're working our way to accepting that. But one thing we can control is, okay, if I'm really angry, I can choose not to get violent or break my things, or, you know, I can choose how I deal with those feelings that I'm feeling. Sometimes all your feelings want you to do is just name them. So one of the best things that you can do in each moment, especially when you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit crawling out of your skin, is, what am I feeling? And try to be as precise as you can. So finding ways to name your feelings is a way that you can sit with them. And I want to be really clear. I don't believe in telling people to think positive, and I don't believe in telling people to be grateful, because I think that those things can create a lot of shame. When we have feelings that aren't the right feelings, then we start to feel ashamed of myself. Oh, I shouldn't feel this, or I shouldn't feel that. I don't believe in that at all. I believe that if you feel sad, cry. Have that feeling. Be with your sadness and be okay with your sadness. And it will move so much faster than if we say, oh no, I shouldn't be sad, or I shouldn't be stressed. I have to be. You don't have to be anything, but you do have to be okay with whatever you're going through, because that's going to help you so much more than trying to resist it in any way. So no shame, because all of your feelings are completely human. And it is also okay to have fear, because this is a global trauma and it's got real consequences. There is a real loss of life happening, and there's real economic consequences. This is a real thing, and you're allowed to have feelings. And one of the things that I want to talk about is the PTSD responses, because it can be really helpful when we think about those to recognize maybe some of what we're going through. So PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. And PTSD is something that happens after a massive trauma, sudden change, exactly like what we're going through. And the 4 responses are fight, flight, freeze, and appease. And you might have heard some of those before, and we're going to talk about them again. So fight, you know that one. What is it? I'm going to take it on. I'm going to knock it down. I'm going to win. I'm going to succeed. I'm going to overcome. Fight can be amazing because it can give us energy. Fight can be really redirected into something very positive. But when it gets a little bit dangerous is when we start trying to control things that we can't control. When we start believing that we can force things to be the way that we want. And in really extreme cases, when we start looking to things like violence and aggression. And so they're things we want to really avoid. The flight response is just running away, just run. And I think we saw that, you know, here in Italy, when they announced in the Lombardy region, they said, you know, now we're going to lock down that region. And a lot of Italians packed their bags and flooded the train stations, absolutely flooded train stations and airports trying to get out. And we go, oh my gosh, you know, that was a really terrible reaction, because we know that that spreads the virus. We know that that's not a really great solution for the bigger problem. But in that moment, those people are experiencing this incredibly strong flight response, and their impulse is to run. So you might notice that when you want to jump out the window because you're so desperate to get out of your apartment, you're having a flight response to this incredible experience of being stuck at home. The freeze response is when you just go cactus. I call it cactus because it's when I'm like, and you become immobilized. And this is a really, really common one. This is a really common one that we know, especially in response to violence. Sometimes we'll be attacked and we'll go, you like to think you'd be really brave. Oh, if somebody attacks me, I'm going to be so solid. Oh, I see that Cece's there, but you can't hear me, Cece? Is that right? No? Have you got me? I think she can hear me. She's tapping her ear. Michelle, can you see if Cece can you help Cece get volume? So with the freeze response, this is one you also might find. That's when you find yourself completely immobilized, just stuck, completely stuck. And it's really important to try and come out of that one, because I find in the freeze response, especially in a situation like that, that kind of immobilization can eventually lead you into depression. And we're going to talk a bit more about that later. So some of that immobilizing behavior. And then there's the appease response. And so in the appease response, it's like, if I just do the right thing, if I just make everybody happy, then this situation's going to be fine, right? If I just behave properly, then this will go away. And so in that appease response, we're trying to bargain, but it doesn't work. But these things are all natural responses to really big kind of shocking, sudden events. So if you recognize some of those, at least you can identify it. And that helps you have a lot of empathy for yourself, a lot of compassion for yourself, and then you can start to find ways through that. How are you going, Cece? Did we get you? Can you hear? I hope so. All right, I'm going to keep going. Oh, Cece, you've got no audio. Okay, I will let Michelle deal with that one. So here's the real challenge. In a situation where we have no control, like that's the truth, we can't control this virus, we have to let go. We have to let go of the idea that we can control what's happening. We have to let go of the idea that we can control the timeline and how our governments are going to respond. We can't. Those things are kind of out of our league. We can lobby our governments and say, you need to make sure there's economic relief packages. We can protest, we can contact our senators, we can do all of those things, but we can't really control this experience. So I want you to remember that there's nothing to fix. You can't fix this. Let go of that idea immediately. Let go of the idea that there is a perfect way to respond to this. There isn't. Whatever happens, it's kind of going to be a bit of a mess, because no one was prepared for this. Our systems aren't designed for it. So we've got to let go of that idea that anyone's going to be able to respond perfectly. I'm not going to be able to respond perfectly, and you're not going to be able to respond perfectly, and that's okay. There is no perfect outcome here. Whatever happens, there's going to be a lot of change, and some of that change is going to, it's going to involve a lot of grief. There's going to be a lot of loss. And we can't control that. We do have to accept that whatever happens, we're going to have to do some grieving to process what's going on. So I want to talk a little bit about the stages of grief, because I think that can really help us. And the original stages of grief were 5, and they've been expanded to 7. So I'll do the whole 7 because they can be useful, because that first one that they've added in is shock. When it first happens, we go into shock, and we just can't quite believe what's happening. And we know that shock because shock ramps up the adrenaline in your body, and it shuts down. You find often people in shock have a little bit of trouble with short-term memory. A lot of memory retention starts to change. All of this is intentional, because your body is putting in place a hyper response system to help you survive. So shock is part of survival mode. Then we start to move into some of the other feelings, and now they don't come in order, right? This gets messy and they bounce all over the place, and you go back and forth. It's not clean or pretty. One of them is denial, and some things around denial, you know, like this virus won't affect me. I'm young, I'm healthy, it's fine. I've got lots of hand sanitizer, not a problem. All those things we tell ourselves to really minimize the problem and to not recognize the problem completely as it is. That's when we find ourselves avoiding, a lot of avoidance behavior. That's when we're in confusion, and it's when we're in big resistance to just accepting what's happening. Then there's anger. You're making me stay home. You took away my whole life. I lost my job. And we get angry at all of the changes that are happening. Anger can also come through in, I need to be right. I am right, and you need to listen to me, and you need to do it my way. That's all coming out of the anger response. And anger is that impulse that we have that's looking to try to control. And sometimes anger can be healthy, hey? Sometimes anger can be a really good motivator because there are some things we can control. And anger can be really good fuel to help us actually drive to control those things. But anger, if it goes the wrong way, can burn you out and it can really eat you up from the inside. So we've got to recognize that anger when it's happening. And we've got to say to our anger, okay, let's recognize that there's a difference between what I can control and what I can't. And let's use the anger to fuel a little bit of what I can control. But let's really let go of what I can't. And let's not let anger turn into violence, aggression, blaming, accusing, and things that make us turn on each other. Because more than ever, we need to be together. We've got to go through this together. So we've got to be a little bit careful with our anger because it can really drive us apart. Anger is one of those ways that we try to cover up fear as well. You know, if I'm angry, I'm not scared, which can be a nice thought, but it can be a tricky strategy. So watch out for that one. Bargaining. Bargaining is the great, okay, well, if we do 2 weeks of lockdown, then everything will be fine, right? If I do this now, then I will get this. Bargaining is our attempt to trade, but this one, we can't trade our way out of it. So if you notice that you're making deals with the situation, okay, well, if I do this, then everything has to be okay, right? You're in the bargaining stage. And, but there are no promises in a situation like this. So we have to be careful not to get stuck with making these silent contracts. If I do this, then that will, because there's no guarantees there. So we've got to be careful not to set ourselves up to be really disappointed, because at a time like this, when our stress is very high, those extra feelings of disappointment can be a bit devastating. So we've got to be careful there. Depression is another stage of grief. And when we start to hit that depression, I mean, we don't know when this will end. And that's quite existential. It's a real sort of existential depression of everything that my life was normally, it's no longer. And there's a grieving for that. And that can really, depression can be those feelings of overwhelmed, when you get that hostility, feeling really hopeless, feeling lonely, feeling sad. All those things are part of that depression stage of grief. And I want you to remember, all of these stages are normal. They are normal human responses to a massive trauma. So if you have them, you don't judge yourself. You just guide yourself very gently through them with really loving hands, and watch out for those red flags that they're starting to go a bit far, like that hostility, violence, aggression, inability to do anything. Those things are red flags that, okay, maybe I need a little bit of help. Maybe I've got to break out of this somehow. Then there's the testing stage. And that's when you start to like test the situation a little bit. Okay, all right, how can I handle this? And you start trialing new things. Maybe you start to tell the story of what's happening in a new way. So for me, part of my testing stage was when I started to look at, okay, how can we build more connection and more human community through isolation? That was a testing stage. That was me saying, maybe there's other ways that we can go through this experience that aren't necessarily all completely disaster. Maybe there's other ways I can work. Maybe there's other ways I can schedule my day. Maybe there's other ways I can study. All of this is starting to test the experience. You're exploring it a little bit. You're checking its limits and seeing what you can create within those boundaries. And that's a really exciting stage when you start to get some ideas about how you can work with the situation. And then the final stage of grief, of course, is accepting. And accepting is wonderful because that's the moment where you go, okay, this is happening. And I have to go forward with exactly the situation as it is. And that's when you put your new plan in place. And that's when you finally start to actually thrive in the new normal. This is a completely new normal. And like I said, these stages, they don't come in order. So I've had acceptance one day, and then by that night, I've been furious and stomping around and going, oh, where does my housemate going? He went to do the shopping yesterday. Why is he going again today? And there I am back in anger. And that morning I was the Dalai Lama. So it's really normal to be bouncing between them all. Don't think of it as a linear thing. When you find yourself in acceptance, really enjoy it, celebrate it, enjoy it. When you're finding yourself in depression, be kind to yourself. Speak beautifully to yourself. Whichever stage you find yourself in, it's okay. And it's okay if you're going round in circles. It's all normal. We have our feelings. We hold them really gently and we take care of them. But I do want to say, don't feed them. Especially when you come up to some of those challenging feelings. You want to be with them. You want to allow them. You want to allow your sadness and grief, but you don't want to feed it. And what do I mean by that? I mean, you don't want to start obsessively researching every tragic article and video about the situation because you're feeling sad and scared. And so you want to give it more fuel. Don't give it more fuel. If you're really angry because people are being, sorry, I'm Australian, I swear sometimes, people are being, why are you doing that? Don't do that. Don't look up more. Give yourself a break. Take a time out. Take a pause. It's okay to be angry, but don't put more fuel on the fire when you find yourself in some of those challenging situations, because that's going to get you stuck in the cycle. And those kinds of things are the things that can lead you into a bit of a depression. And that is a risk here. Another one that we tend to do is we get trapped in worry about the future. We get really anxious about, like, okay, I'm feeling great today, but what if I'm feeling terrible tomorrow? What if tomorrow's a bad day? Okay, I've got toilet paper now, but what if I don't have toilet paper tomorrow? Apparently Australians are very concerned about toilet paper. Here, I think it's more food and medicine and those kinds of things. Don't block whatever you're enjoying now with worrying about the future, because then you're checkmating yourself. In all of this experience, you're going to have moments of such beauty and connection and laughter and humanity, and I want you to enjoy them fully. And when we worry about the future, we chop off some of the pleasure that's available right now. And so if you get sad, it's okay to be sad, but don't freak out. Oh my God, I'm going to be sad again tomorrow or next week. Or we don't need to predict. And this is all part of that letting go of control, letting go of control. I can't control tomorrow or next week. I can control today. And today is going to have beautiful things and challenging things. And I want you to be okay with both of those. And so there's a really beautiful term, and it's called anticipatory grief. And it's like, I know that things are going to get worse. And so maybe if I'm really sad now, it'll save me from being sad later. Maybe someone I know is going to get sick. Maybe someone I know something bad will happen. So I'm going to start panicking and grieving now, and I'm going to stop talking to them now, or I'm going to panic flood them now. All of that is living in the future. When you find yourself having one of those responses, don't judge yourself. It's all good. We're human. We're going to do it. But notice it. Notice that it's happening. Give yourself a hug and go, okay, honey, let it go. Let it go. Let it go. What's here now? What's in front of me right now? What am I drinking? Can I taste it? Who am I speaking with? Can I be really present with them? Can I lay under my blanket and really feel the texture of my blanket and how warm the heater is, or the sun coming through the window? Bring yourself back. Bring yourself back to the present when you find yourself in those moments. Ups and downs are totally normal. It's completely normal. We're going to go through some of those healthy steps of things that we want to put in place, and just know that it's okay not to get them perfect. You will not be at your best every day. Every day your best will look very different from moment to moment, from day to day, and that's okay. Expect ebbs and flows in your energy. Expect to go up and down. It's all normal. You'll experience the whole spectrum of feelings in one day. And anytime you find yourself getting into some of those maybe negative coping strategies, and we'll talk about them a bit more, anytime you find yourself going in a spiral, I call it the kungfu redirect. Because in kung fu, if something comes for you, you don't try to block it. You try to receive its energy and gently redirect it into a direction where it's not going to create any harm. And I like to think about that when I find myself spiraling or angry or smoking too many cigarettes or some absurd reaction that we all have. I like to go, oh, look, this is happening. Okay, I'm not going to get mad. I'm not going to block it, but I am going to gently see if I can redirect it in another direction that's a little bit less harmful for myself and others. Another thing to be aware of is that if you have a history of trauma, which can be anything from divorce to death to violence to rape to assault, any of these kinds of things, it may be activated by this situation. If you've had past experiences of losing control over your life, having that power taken away from you, being isolated, being trapped, all of those things are going to be coming up right now. And it's just okay to be aware of that and take some time with yourself to go, okay, you know what? I'm feeling a lot right now. What is now and what is the past? And give yourself an opportunity to do a bit of exploring around that. See if you can separate a little bit what you're feeling, what's coming up from before and what's coming up now, because being able to see the difference can help you to lower the volume a little bit on some of those feelings when they really come up strong and hard. So we're just trying to gently stay present, even with triggers coming from the past and worries about the future. Whenever we face either of those directions, pulling us back or forward in time, we go, okay, but how can I shuffle my way gently, gently back to now? Your energy is going to be different every day. So it's really good to set goals. It's really good to stay active, but you've got to stay curious about your energy levels each day because they're going to be a little bit less than you think they are. On a normal day, we've got floods of energy, but when we're going through a trauma or a challenging experience, we're actually burning a lot of fuel just by coping, and we don't realize that. So one of the things that we need to recognize is maybe what you would normally get done in a day, cut that by even 50%, if not more some days. You're not going to be able to live up to the kind of potential you could on a big and normal day. If you start to feel that anxiety and that you can't unplug because everything that's happening is so urgent, I have to check the numbers, I have to read more information, I have to send everybody back home every article that I find, I have to make everybody do the right thing. And you can hear how those thoughts start to spiral and speed up and spin and your heart rate is going up. That's the anxiety and fear taking over. It's okay to feel them, but don't let them have the driver's seat. We want to get those things out of the driver's wheel of the car, put them in the back seat and say, okay, I know you're here with me, but I'm making the decisions about where we go and what we do. So we've got to backseat some of those feelings. And when we do that, we go, okay, I know that there's some challenges to face. You can make a plan. How am I going to take on each problem? I'm going to break that down into steps. I'm going to do small steps. I'm going to remember to only control what I can. I'm going to talk to her in a really nice voice. I know you're scared today. I know you're scared today, baby, but it's all going to be okay. I talk to myself constantly. It really works. And then let go. Because what we're developing is our distress tolerance. We're developing the ability to be okay with not always being okay. And this is a really key tool in resilience and mental health. Sometimes it's okay to not be okay. Now, one of the things that I really want you to do is I want you to make a list for yourself. And I want you to put a couple of headings on it. I want you to write challenges. Then I want you to write reactions. And then I want you to write responses. And you're going to be a little bit like David Attenborough doing a sort of wildlife documentary where he's observing that, you can see from the left angle that they are initiating the ritual. You're really going to be curious about yourself. And I want you to be playful and light with your curiosity. I want you to write the challenges that you're facing as you go through this experience. I'm lonely. I want to hug somebody. I'm going nuts. I can't finish my book or my work or my piano recital or whatever it is. Write down those challenges and then get your documentary brain on and observe yourself and write down, how do I react when those challenges hit? And don't judge yourself, but this tends to include things like Marisa finds herself smoking a bunch of cigarettes in the morning. I quit smoking. It might include, drinking too much wine. It might include, a very popular one is just going back to bed. I'm back in bed. I take to my bed is a really popular response. These things are all normal, right? All of them. I want you to write down what yours are. We all have them. This is an opportunity for you to discover, how do you react when the pressure's on? And just be really curious about that. Then in your third column, the response column, this is the space for your kungfu redirect. This is where you go, okay, I recognize that these are some ways that I react, but how can I choose to respond instead? So rather than reacting unconsciously and going into some of these negative coping strategies, how can I recognize, oops, I'm in the middle of a negative coping strategy right now. Okay, what was the challenge that set off this behavior? And what might a better response be? And see if you can just slowly start to practice redirecting yourself. It won't be perfect. It'll be messy. You won't suddenly become this gleaming star of perfect behavior. Absolutely not. But you will start to get an opportunity to recognize what sets you off, or what your triggers are, what kind of behaviors that are a bit negative you tend to jump into, and what you'd prefer to replace them with, which is really, who would I prefer to be? And can I practice being that person? And then it's just practice. And you'll stuff it up all the time. I stuff it up all the time. That's not the point. But the point is to be able to observe yourself and start to make a few better choices. So some of those negative coping strategies that we particularly talk about, like denial behaviors, going out in the street anyway, having a party. So risk-taking behaviors, drinking excessively, excessive drugs, unsafe sex, any obsessive behaviors that you start to catch yourself in, excessive smoking, high-risk online behavior. You know, there's a lot of trouble you can get into online. And if you find yourself going down the online whirlpool, you know, you can start to recognize, uh-oh, okay, I'm getting obsessive. Disordered eating, we often take it out. Some of us binge eat, some of us start to control our food, some of us just completely go off our food, or I have to eat perfectly or I'll get sick. We can start to get into a little bit of that hyper controlling of what we put in our bodies. Too much control is just as unhealthy as no control. Same thing with exercise. There's a sweet spot. If you find that you're completely inactive or obsessively exercising, both of those can get you into a bit of trouble. Any kind of self-harm behaviors that come in, any kind of self-harm that, you know, I know a lot of people, and we often have that history of self-punishment, self-judgment, and all the different forms that self-harm can take, from berating yourself mentally to hurting yourself physically. Just pay attention to all of those. And if any of those are starting to sneak in, screaming at each other, getting into big explosive anger, those kinds of things, that's when you go, oh, okay, number one, what set that off? And number two, what might be better? And better means less harmful. And a less harmful is better than completely harmless. So if you manage to reduce that behavior a little, you get to cheer, you get to celebrate yourself, you get to have a party, because a little bit is better than nothing. I really believe in that. And so when you're looking for things to replace those with, you want to ask yourself, what makes me feel good and what makes me feel safe? Because usually they're the two things that we're looking for when we get into any of those behaviors. I want to feel good, or I want to feel safe. So you've got an opportunity now to start to explore those two questions for yourself. What makes you feel good? What makes you feel safe? And this is where it gets really exciting, because now we're talking about possibility. Now we're talking about making new discoveries, finding new passions, finding new interests, getting really creative. Maybe you love poetry, maybe you find a love of French film you never knew you had. Whatever it is, this is your opportunity for discovery and for surprising yourself, because you might not be who you think you are. And you've got an opportunity here to open up whole new sides of yourself. And that's really exciting. So stay curious and playful, even with your muddy bits. Even when you're like, oh, I'm a little bit ashamed of that, stay curious and light with it, because shame is useless. There's no point. We're all human. We're all a little bit muddy sometimes. It's okay. Now, managing stress. You want only accurate information. And you've probably heard this one before, but I'm going to say it again because it's really important. Choose a proper trusted news source. Government sources are good, or a proper, with high journalistic credibility publication. Choose your news sources. Don't read everything because you'll blow your mind. And don't stay online all day, please. Set yourself a time limit. I'm going to look at the numbers at this hour of the day. I'm going to binge read my newspaper articles for half an hour at this time and then walk away. Because if you let your whole day be consumed with what's going on, you will make yourself crazy. You will end up in depression. You will end up overwhelming your system because it's just too much information. You have to control your inputs. You only have a certain amount of energy and a certain amount of capacity. So you've got to control what you let into that precious space. You've got to think about your battery. And every time you're taking in that information, you're depleting your energy because it's a lot to absorb. You've only got so much energy in the day, so save some of it. Save some of it for pleasurable things. Save some of it for spending time with yourself, discovering yourself, whatever it is. Don't give it all to the crisis. Save some of it for you. And this can be really challenging because now we have no schedules. Now we have nowhere to go. Now, I mean, it used to be so easy, right? You get up in the morning, well, I have to be at work or school or play group or whatever it is by this time. And therefore I will have a shower and I will blah, blah, blah. We don't have that anymore. So what you're being asked is to switch from external motivation, my schedule and other people and structures give me my schedule, to internal motivation. And that's going to take a lot of fuel because now you have to decide your schedule. You have to decide when to shower. You have to decide when to go to work at your desk. And maybe you've lost your job. So going to work means exploring what work might look like in this non-work period. You have to choose. So you've got to set a schedule. Hands down, set a schedule. Sometimes you'll skip it. Sometimes you won't be up to it. Don't make it too ambitious. Set a reasonable schedule. Don't overbook yourself. Be modest. And every time you succeed, cheer, applaud, celebrate your wins. I prefer to say celebrate the wins than practice gratitude. Because with practicing gratitude, sometimes you don't feel grateful. Gratitude can come naturally, but celebrating your wins, you can do that every day. Today I showered and that was a win. And sometimes that's all you've got, but that's awesome. And I want you to be celebrating those wins because then we're talking about internal motivation. And that's something we need to generate in this time, our inner motor. Another thing that can really give us a sense of purpose, which can be really missing right now because all the things that used to give us purpose are gone, is helping other people. And so that can come through all kinds of things, volunteering. It can be supporting people who have health conditions, who have physical or mental disabilities. There are people in this situation who are at bigger risk because of discrimination, violence, poverty. You can get involved in helping those people, in being a support, which can include even just knowing who that person is in your network and checking in on them regularly if you're not allowed to visit. It could be delivering food. It could be helping them to get to a medical appointment. Finding ways to help others can be a really great way of building community in another way. Recognize your signs of stress. Notice your body. One of the ways I know I'm stressed, my shoulders are up here. My jaw is like, ting, and my breathing goes to about there. And I don't even notice it, but I'm shuffling around my house like this. And then in a moment I go, oh, wait, hang on a minute. Whoa. The other day I did some arm stretches, and that was the moment that I realized that my entire body had been crunched forward for maybe 3 days. And I went, oops, okay. So your body is your clue to stress. So check in with your body at least once a day, which was more than I did at the beginning. Check in with your body. And next week, we're actually going to do a guided body meditation to help you relax and to help you work through that. Oh, mosquito, Florence. Check in with your body, deepen your breathing, invite your body to relax, invite your jaw to relax, because so much of our stress gets held here, the jaw and the shoulders and this upper back, because we hunch over to protect ourselves, right? This is protection stance. We're at the ready. We don't have to be at the ready all the time. So just bringing that down, breathing into our bellies, using our bodies to bring us back to a nice, calm state. So one of the things to do is that making your action plan, and your action plan and your schedule are really vital tools. Routine, routine, routine. You need a routine, as simple as it is. I have a rule. I am not allowed a glass of wine before 6 p.m. Not before aperitivo hour. That is my rule. And it saves me, because of course there's some days where I go, I've got no energy, I can't work, I've been trying to work, I don't want to do it, I don't want to exercise, maybe I'll have a, no, but I can have one at 6 o'clock. And that helps me. So scheduling in your little treats, scheduling in your massive ice cream binge, scheduling in when you're going to do that really self-spoiling, a little bit indulgent, naughty thing, knowing it's on the schedule can stop it from becoming every single day, every single hour. It can be a way to help keep it in check, because you've got it on the schedule. You need to have some sense of a weekend. You cannot let every day be the same. Do find a way in your schedule to declare the weekend, or even if it's Monday and Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, whichever 2 days, but give yourself a total break 2 days of the week. Don't expect yourself to be on every day, because you'll make yourself crazy. And don't be off every day either. So you've got to give yourself some diversity in your days, because that's going to keep you engaged. That's going to keep you more alive and vibrant. When you're looking at how you schedule, I want you to balance work and play. It's great to want to study. It's great to want to finish your PhD. It's great to want to learn an instrument. It's great to want to get those things done. But you also might not have as much brain space for those things as you would usually. So make sure they're scheduled in the right amount, because if you schedule too much, you'll overwhelm yourself and you'll feel bad about yourself. You'll start to create feelings of failure. I failed to edit my thesis for 8 hours today. There is no way anybody is editing their thesis for 8 hours right now. Be reasonable with yourself and your schedule. Please also consider making a balance between alone time and social time. You need time to connect. You need internet aperitivo. You need family game time and time with your kids and all the things that you're doing. You also need time in silence. So if you've got a big family, if you're in a big shared apartment, see if you can come up with a schedule where you carve out a little window for each person of silence. Time in the shared room by yourself. I get the lounge room from this hour to this hour. Everybody stay out. See if you can carve out that time, because we all need a little bit of alone time to process. And we need time in connection. So if you have the other problem and you tend to isolate, and you tend to withdraw, and suddenly being with other people is even more challenging because we're all stuck at home, you're going to have to challenge yourself to make some appointments, to have a Skype with someone, to have a phone conversation, to reach out. And these are really, really mental health protection tactics. Make sure there's a bit of exercise. I hate exercise. I'm a disaster. The other day, I got a little bit too overexcited because I hadn't exercised for 10 days. I did 1 billion squats to BBC Radio 1, and now I've been waddling around my house for 2 days. So try not to go for the extremes. Try to find that thing that's the sweet spot for you. Maybe it's just dancing to the radio for half an hour a day. Maybe it's cleaning the stairs so you climb up and down them. Maybe it's yoga online. Whatever it is for you, find a way to move your body a little bit each day, because it really does help, and it helps that relaxing. This is a really, one of the things we talk about in mental health is we talk about in times of crisis, we've got to build our army. And what does it mean to build an army? That means I need to strengthen my support system. And our support systems look like knowing who our GP is, who is the doctor, who is the person that we call if we're feeling a bit sick or if we have a question, even non-virus related. I'm on a waiting list for a surgery. So one of the things is occasionally if I have pain or if I worry that my situation's a bit worse, do I know who I call? Do I have the number, the contact of a therapist, just in case it gets a bit too tough? Do I know who to call in that case? Do I have people in my family and friends network that I can reach out to if I need food, if I need to loan some money, whatever it is, we need to build our little support team, because when we know we've got people to reach out to in case of crisis, stress comes down. So really consciously build your army. And I think that this is one of those really beautiful things, because sometimes in normal life, we can be together at a party with 100 people and feel really lonely. Here we've got an opportunity to completely flip that. And now while we're all alone, stuck in our houses and apartments and rooms, we have an opportunity to cultivate really close and connected and intimate friendships and relationships, and really find out what intimacy can mean. When we get rid of the easiness of physically being together, we have to try a little bit harder to be present for each other. And this can open up real magic. My friendships in Florence have deepened so incredibly in the last 3 weeks. It's blown my mind. And now we're really like family. So there's beautiful opportunity here. So build that support network. Now, with the last thing that I'm going to talk about, God, I've been talking forever. Oh gosh, I'm going on a bit. Anyway, well, never mind. Listen, the last thing I'm going to talk about is self-care. But I also want to sort of subtitle self-care as self-exploration. We're stuck with ourselves in this thing, whether we like it or not. It's us and us. So sometimes we're going to have to find ways to soothe ourselves and to be curious about ourselves. So I want to introduce you to some of the different categories of self-care, because that can help you be more creative when you're looking for ways to feel better. So emotional self-care. Emotional self-care is things like you're doing now. Logging onto this was emotional self-care. It's anything that allows you to reflect and process your emotions. I do a lot of writing. I'm a writer. I journal. That's a huge one for me. That's massive. Exactly. Yep. Writing and journaling can be a massive source of emotional self-care. So can any kind of art, any creation, any art making, making music, listening to music, identifying your feelings, self-soothing. So, you know, when like, you know, you say self-care and people go, oh, here we go. Light a candle, have a bubble bath, put a face mask on. You know, this is the sort of really cheesy kind of self-care thing we all know. But what we're actually talking about when people talk about those things is we're talking about touch. We're talking about the importance of the body to help you regulate. So little children who've had to be isolated in hospitals, one of the things they discovered was that those children, they start to rub their own limbs. And this is called self-soothing. They stroke their own arms, they stroke their own bodies because they're soothing themselves. When you're having a hot bath, you're soothing yourself. When you're putting on a face mask or taking one off, you're soothing yourself. When you say to your partner, could you just tickle my hair for like an hour? You're asking for soothing. So think about those kind of body experiences, like putting cream on your body or those things. Think about them in terms of, I'm calming my nervous system. My body is asking me for soothing touch. So that is emotional self-care, any kind of self-soothing. Respecting your limits is emotional self-care. Creating and enforcing boundaries in the household for your mental health. I need silence between this time and this time. I am not a mum from this hour until this hour. These things are all emotional self-care. Healthy boundaries are self-care. Feeling empowered to ask for help when you need it, and the courage to walk away sometimes, just walk away. Just walk away. That's emotional self-care. The courage to be different. Maybe you're handling this differently to other people. That's okay. That's emotional self-care. feeling confident to handle it in your way. And distress tolerance, like we talked about before, being okay with not being okay. And mindfulness. Mindfulness is one of those beautiful emotional self-care techniques. I am fully in this moment, in what I'm doing right now, whatever it is. That's emotional self-care. Another kind of self-care is physical self-care. So we know this one, right? Eating well, staying hydrated. I am constantly dehydrated because I just forget to drink water. Staying hydrated, eating some good meals, getting enough sleep. And sleep can be a bit tricky. So, you know, you can listen to some of those meditation tracks online to help soothe you before you go to bed, but trying to get enough sleep, balancing work and rest, all those, any kind of body work, any kind of exercise, all of that is physical self-care. Mental self-care. Mental self-care is quite awesome because that's about the stuff that gets you excited. What inspires you? What makes you curious? What gets your juices going? Sometimes you've got to give yourself permission to throw this whole situation out the window and go, do you know what though? But I've just developed an incredible obsession with the particular angle of the tattoo of Jason Momoa, and I'm going to research the entire Maori history of tattoos. That is a fantastic bit of mental self-care because there's something that really interests you, that fascinates you, and you're letting yourself go for it. You're letting yourself research, go for it. It's an awesome one. Knowing when not to engage in a debate. And you know, on Facebook right now, on everything right now, it's a bit of a field day, yeah? It is an unregulated mess and people are fighting over everything to do with this situation. Sometimes mental self-care is just going, not today, not today. Even if I think you're wrong, even if I think you need to be corrected, not today, not today, I'm tagging out. Deep listening, reading great books, lectures, things like that that really fascinate you. That's mental self-care. Social self-care, like we've talked about, making a social schedule, joining an online open mic night, having online aperitivo with your friends, having social time. That is also self-care. That's one of the tools in your toolkit. Finding new ways to be together in this new non-physical space. That's your social self-care. Spiritual self-care is really beautiful. Some of us are religious and some of us are not religious, but that doesn't mean that you can't engage in spiritual self-care, because spiritual self-care is anything that gives you a feeling of sacredness. Spiritual self-care is what can I do or visit that gives me a feeling of being very sacred. And you know that you're there because time slows down. When we enter that spiritual space, time slows a little and we get that bigger perspective. So one of my favorite spiritual self-cares was time in nature. Of course, that's a bit limited now. So maybe I'm trying to grow my pot plant very mindfully. But another thing that you can do is create little altars in your home. And you can put whatever you like there. It can be pictures of your grandparents and family. It can be little mementos from beautiful places you've been in the world or times that you've had. But building a little altar or a sacred space where when you need to, you can sit there and you can enter that beautiful meditative feeling where you remember that we are bigger than this. We are bigger than crisis. We are all connected. We're all one, and we can overcome whatever we're facing. So whatever it is that gives you that feeling, design a space somewhere in your home or garden where you can go and experience that feeling. It might be a little statue, it might be a piece of art, it might be a religious figure or symbol, whatever it is for you, that's spiritual self-care. And then the last one is practical, yeah? Practical self-care is it's time to do the laundry. Yes, you have to wash your pajamas. It's time to wash the bathrobe. Practical self-care is, yes, you still have to pay the bills if you can afford it, or you have to contact the companies and say, yeah, that's not happening. Everyone's unemployed. You're going to have to wait. Practical self-care is just taking care of those nuts and bolts things that are on your list, handling the groceries, the laundry, the homework, the assignments, setting ground rules for your shared spaces. All that stuff is the really practical stuff. So when you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, when you're feeling stressed, when you're feeling like, whoa, go to your self-care list and say, okay, what do I need right now? Do I need emotional? Do I need practical? Do I need physical? Do I need spiritual? Do I need mental? Which one do I need? And feel out each of those ideas, and one of them will feel right. And the more you build up on your list, the more tools you're going to have in your pocket. We arrive at the end of my notes, I'm going to unmute